Prof, thank you so much for taking a deep dive in this afternoon's conversation and unpacking for us the importance of educator well-being, the role of the principal, and what skills are critical in order to manage well-being. So let's invite folk this afternoon. I'm going to invite you for the next few minutes to ask your questions to Prof directly. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to ask you just to unmute yourself. And as you unmute yourself, you will see that there is a reactions button at the bottom of the Zoom account where you can raise your hand and pose your question. I'm going to ask also folk to remain succinct in your question. Don't keep it long so that we can have quite a few people engaging with Prof. Thank you. Open to the floor right now for questions and opportunities to reflect back what you've heard. Thank you. Reynold Morris. Reynold, over to you.
Thank you, Selwyn. My question to Prof is, well-being means different things to different people. And therein lies the challenge of you can't have a one-size-fits-all. What has been your experience, with principals in terms of just approaching this? And do you perhaps have some anecdotal information about, just very practically what some principals had to do to make sure that they actually inculcate the culture of well-being? Thank you.
Right. Can we have another question? Well, I'll take 2 or 3 questions and then we'll allow Prof to respond. Laura, over to you. Can you unmute, Laura? You're muted.
Here we go. I thought this was an exceptionally good presentation, and it really resonated with me and for much of the research that we've been doing at the moment. So Prof, bang on the button. I take my hat off to you. It really was an exceptionally good presentation. I think that there's so much that's in our control of the teachers and control of the principals, and everything that you've mentioned can be worked on within your control. The part that worries me is that and I've posed this question in the chat, many teachers appear to be demotivated and unable to hold those positive attitudes with the current curriculum and the dropping of the sports activities after school, which previously helped to then bond the students to the teachers. But if the teachers don't believe in what they are teaching and feel that much of it and the curriculum is outdated, unnecessary, does not hold value, and does not even reflect the diversity of the classroom. In other words, the curriculum is out of the control, out of the principal's control. How do you build that well-being around their performance and their joy of teaching, because the subject matter that they are teaching, they no longer believe in or find it has value?
Thank you, Laura. We'll come back to that. And the last question from Jen Bafana. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, sir. Prof, thank you once again for just exuding the passion. But I just wanted to lean more on leadership because, as Prof was ending, he made reference to, principals should also make use of the leadership team, which is obviously the school management team. But I'm sure within his lectures, he has emphasized the major difference between a management style and a leadership style. And if you speak about well-being, is it not more suitable, or is the assumption not that we are following a leader who would then obviously care for the well-being of the team? Because in my experience, I've just come to find that managers really do not care much about the well-being of the team, because you sort of need to be on your A game every day. So is it not more a leadership versus management first argument then we then get to speak about the assumptions that we then look at well-being. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much to colleagues. The first question was about well-being and the different meanings. You are correct, sir. People have different meanings. You also would have your own understanding and perhaps your own meaning. When I was preparing for this presentation, I also came across many different meanings of what it means. This notion of educator well-being or teacher well-being. So people will never always agree. Just like we don't always agree on a number of issues. But you need, in my view, to understand your own context, because context matters. An educator who is working in a well-resourced school up here in Pretoria or Johannesburg, I'm not going to mention schools, names, or an educator who is working in a township or in a rural environment, which is not well-resourced. These educators or even school principals, they are likely to have different understandings and different meanings of what it means in this particular case for an educator's well-being to be taken care of. Let me share this with you. When I began my teaching in the late 80s, 1987, 88, 89, up to about 1990, I was working in schools where we lived or stayed in cottages. Some of those schools were rural schools that did not have sufficient cottages. So for a school principal then, it became important that he took care of his educators' well-being through working with the communities in those areas that schools had cottages for the teachers, because cottages were an important issue in those schools. So context then, in my mind, it comes into the picture here when we talk about educator well-being. Whereas that context which I've just painted now does not exist in other communities. People wake up from their houses or homes and then they go to work and they work in resource schools, whether they are township schools or rural schools. So my answer then to you, direct answer would be, yes, you are correct to say that people have got different meanings of well-being. But my argument is that you should look at your own context and then from there decide what is more important for this school for the achievement of the core business of the school, which is teaching and learning. I'm not sure, sir, if this answers your question, but if it does not, we can engage further later on. The second point was about teachers that are demotivated. Have all the answers, because perhaps in some cases there are genuine reasons why these educators are demotivated. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a responsibility as school leaders, even though those educators are demotivated. It is our responsibility, in my view, to make sure that you motivate them. There are hundreds of books that you can buy and read so that you become a good motivator. And then you can motivate your staff members. And they, in turn, Laura, your educators, can then motivate their learners. You know, when I worked in Durban, I used to work in a very poor ship of Inanda. It's full of slums where learners did not have the kind of motivation that we expected of them. So as a school principal, I used to say to them, even though you come from an informal settlement, you think you are not important. You are as important as the child of the president. And you can be something in life. Then I will tell them a story about my own life, how I grew up in the rural areas of Umbumbulu and the south of Durban, how I ended up becoming a teacher, how I ended up becoming a university lecturer, how I am now a professor at a university. In this university, perhaps that in the past used to exclude us. When I say us, I'm now referring to those that are not quite in this audience. So the point I'm making is that we as educators, we as school principals, we have a responsibility to motivate not just our educators, but our learners as well. One other thing that I like to share with teachers is that if you're a teacher, never think that you will become rich, be a Patrice Motsepe. The money that you earn or the salary that you earn is just sufficient for you to earn a living. If you want to become rich, perhaps go back to university and start to become an accountant or any other profession that pays very well. But we teachers, we earn just enough to survive. And then the last question that I had was about leadership and management. Ladies and gentlemen, these two are very important, very, very important. It's not leadership or management. They have got to be there, both of them. We normally say to students, leadership is about bigger vision. When you've got this bigger vision about your school, or when you are the leader of South Africa, you are the president, you have got this big vision that you share with your cabinet ministers, that you share with the country, and then you try to get a buy-in from all of us so that we are able to follow behind you because you have got this vision. Management is about processes. It's about making sure that educators are on time. They are there in the classroom and they are teaching. They finish the curriculum and so on and so forth. But it is not correct to say everybody must be a leader. My view would be that be a leader and a manager at the same time. You need both these qualities, especially if you are a school principal, because there are these processes that are there and you have got to make sure that they are implemented. Like I've just given examples of teachers arriving at school on time, teaching throughout the day, and making sure that the day ends at the time that it is supposed to end. So those colleagues would be my responses to the questions that were made. But I'm sure there are also other colleagues in this platform who have different ideas as to how we can address these three challenges that were raised by our colleagues.